Snow clotted beneath the railway bridge, swallowing sirens into a dull metallic throb. The sedan coasted into shadow, heater fading to a thin whisper while frost chewed the windshield's edges. Beyond the drift, an SUV idled with doors ajar like open jaws, breath pluming from its grille. Footfalls patterned the concrete. A crowbar gleamed, then disappeared against a sleeve. Aiden curled around a mended bear, knees tight, heartbeat louder than weather. Rex canine planted square at his side, hackles rising, gaze pinned to motion. Detective Jonah Reyes mapped distances in the dark, counting angles, measuring time against fear. Snow dusted boot prints and erased them in the same breath. A sign chain rattled and clapped like judgment. Memory pressed forward with the cold. A father's warning, a key's glint, a house that lied in daylight. The older hunter smiled into the underpass gloom. He mistook silence for advantage. 12 faces lifted in slow unison, eyes catching winter through tall glass and turning it into ritual. The courthouse tasted of old wood and iron, a place where words calcified into outcomes. Judge Edwin Carr regarded the room like a surveyor of landslides. Aiden sat small on a bench, shoulders inside wool, fingers buried in Rex canine's ruff. The dog's chest rose and fell with patient gravity, a metronome against panic. Marissa Vane's composure hardened and then hairline fractured, Conrad Rusk's posture compressing as if weight finally found him. The district attorney's notes lay stacked like rungs, climbed meticulously over days. Breath gathered, decisions gathered, history thickened. In the fractional pause before sound, the room held the porch night, the bank vault cold, the motel curtain tremor, the underpass echo. Verdicts did not arrive. They landed, heavy as ice on a brittle branch. The branch decided whether to hold.
Portland crouched under January glare, streets skinned in glass that remembered every tire. The yellow house pretended warmth and offered none, its porch light burning midday like a lie told confidently. Aiden stood barefoot in damp socks, sweater heavy, hair pasted to a forehead that tried not to shiver. The door's latch had spoken in the language of exclusion. Icy water had turned superstition into punishment, and the cold climbed inside his bones with method. The bear's ear seam scratched the skin of his wrist, thread roughed where hands had mended desperation. Wind crawled across the boards and lifted nothing. Then, paw prints. A shadow built from muscle and intent stepped into the frame. A shepherd reading the scene as if it were scent written on wood. Rex Canine took position between boy and open world, body aligned to threat, breath fogging like signal flares. Protection chose its direction. Thoresenham filled a small precinct room, a domesticated lightning that made everything feel temporary. Steam rose from styrofoam, and Aiden lifted a spoon with both hands, the spoon steadying him back. Jonah's jacket draped over narrow shoulders, a mobile shelter stitched from duty and instinct. Rex Canine anchored the chair leg with his ribcage, eyes sweeping doors, corners, shoes, faces, returning to the boy as if the universe reset there. The bear lay on the table, ears seemed rigid in a way fabric should not be. Experience taught fingertips to listen. A thumb traced the ridge, found resistance, persuaded threads to yield. Metal kissed air with a silver blink. A key stamped with consequence slid into a pouch, but its weight lodged higher, somewhere behind sternum and vow. Winter pressed at the windows. Inside, warmth gathered around three beings who had not agreed to this story and would finish it. Paper carried the ghost of a careful hand. Graham Turner's journal spoke in clean, slanted lines that sounded like a man measuring deception with a carpenter's square. Names moved through entries like shadows returning to the same corner. Signatures altered by an unfamiliar wrist. Balances eroding in tidy increments. Fear appeared not as panic, but as a tension sharpened to painful clarity. Several pages later, suspicion hardened. defined by dates, cross-references, an outline of motive that fit like a key. The ink thinned near the end where illness breathed at the margins. He documented varieties of bitterness on his tongue, the dizziness after a single glass, the sudden compaction of nights. He wrote a sentence that changed the air. If the end accelerates, it is not nature. He left a direction, not poetry, and tucked the rest where Steele would remember. Every line pointed toward the boy he could not shield. Cold deepened in the bank's vault level, fluorescent light sketching blue on polished steel. Breath crystallized into thought, and boots learned to step softly on tile that repeated footfalls into infinite metallic whispers. Arthur Pike's hands trembled the way careful men tremble when protocol intersects with grief. The lock system complied, master over master, then waited for the small key carried out of cotton and stitches. Aiden glanced at Jonah, and the glance returned steadiness, an exchange of current. The box slid free, long and inexplicably heavy, paper outweighing metal by what it described. Folders aligned like ribs of a body. A leather notebook exhaled faint tannin. A flash drive glinted with modern certainty. Pages lifted. Financials flexed. Letters spoke plainly. The notebook opened to a paragraph that felt like a door unlatching in winter. Proof rearranged to the room. Somewhere above, street noise went on, unaware that futures tilted.
Traffic pulled thin across ice-polished lanes, red lights fogging and clearing in steady cycles. Jonah kept the sedan in the river of pars, reading mirrors like maps, noticing the black SUV 2 vehicles back, noticing how it respected distance until it did not. Tires hissed like snakes, Aiden tucked into wool and muscle, back pressed to Rex Canine's flank, tiny hand inside thick fur. The dog watched windows as if they were mouths. Headlights narrowed. Lane changes became questions and answers. The city's grid offered paths that looked the same and were not. Jonah decided by instinct trimmed with training, turning into narrower streets where hesitation punished heavier machines. Frost climbed sidewalls and erased edges. The SUV closed in, hunger waking inside its engine. The sedan's heater coughed and caught, a weak sun in a small world. Evidence in the trunk decided how brave everyone would need to be. The Evergreen Motel held heat the way a tired hand holds coins, with effort and without pride. Neon tubed its name into broken syllables over cracked paint. Dana Mercer opened a door that let fatigue spill into a room more yellow than bright. Shoulders rounded not from age, but from carrying unshared knowledge. A nurse's coat frayed softly at the cuff, and eyes learned to avoid mirrors. The table held papers stacked without flourish, dates and amounts and symptoms represented with clinical cruelty. She spoke like someone who loved accuracy more than forgiveness, and the recorder on the table absorbed the gravity. She had watched a decline accelerate in ways that charts do not name. She had refused a demand and accepted a bribe, then written both down to keep from drowning in them. The storm outside tightened. Rex Canine lay between door and boy, a hinge made of vigilance.
Shadows shifted across motel fabric, weak lamplight gathering their edges into shapes a room should not host. Knuckles visited the door in 3 heavy knocks that pretended authority and wore none. Footsteps scuffed the walkway and then paused to listen the way predators listen for breath. Jonah measured the frame, the wall gap, the angle through which a crowbar could translate in tension. The room's air thinned. Dana's papers made a papery rustle that sounded like memory unrolling. Aiden pressed closer to the dog, heartbeat steadying where fur met cheek. Rex Canine stared at the curtain of synthetic fibers and saw through it without eyes. The second set of steps retreated, then tires chewed slush, then quiet arrived short of comfort. Threat had tested the seam and noted resistance. The recorder sat on the table like a seed that had outgrown its pot. Snow whispered at the window and waited. Plastic scuffed beneath a thumb as the recorder activated, its tiny red eye turning on like a confession lamp. Mechanism hiss filled the pause before voice. The dead returned not as ghost, but as sound shaped by lungs that were fighting harder than speech deserved. Graham Turner's tone carried resolve rolled thin by nausea, the cadence of a man still measuring even while the floor tilted. Words named a substance folded into ritual, a bitterness disguised as care, a motive built from inheritance and resentment. Glass ticked a table. Air shifted. A chair moved fast, then slower. The file ended with a sound that had always been a question. The room listened to silence as if it could extract one more syllable. Snow crept under the door and melted on the carpet. The present accepted custody of the past, and nothing outside changed, which meant everything had.
Rumor traveled corridors the way heat travels metal, invisible until fingertips find the burn. The precinct carried echoes, case numbers half-whispered, keys mentioned like charms, locker doors slammed too hard by hands that pretended boredom. Information leaked by the ounce and pooled by the gallon. Jonah felt trust constrict to a narrow tunnel where only work could pass. Paperwork multiplied like frost in corners. Phones rang with ordinary crimes and ordinary grief, and through them ran an arterial thread that pulsed toward the case that would not stay sealed. Faces practiced normal. The boys' room stayed quiet except for the sound of pages turning and a dog repositioning his bones against tile. Lila Hart moved like a lighthouse, steady sweep, warm radius, eyes that held without demanding. Outside, Winter performed continuity. Inside, Jonah sorted allies from bystanders and drew a circle smaller, then smaller again until it fit. The park's paths cut white through bare trees, a script written for boots and erased by noon sun. Aiden wore Jonah's jacket like armor borrowed from a larger story. Rex K9 patrolled a perimeter that adjusted to the boys' speed, calibrating distance, checking wind, checking sound. Two shapes detached from tree trunks with the posture of men who wanted to be background, their hands hid in pockets that could contain intent. The shepherd read the angle and the timing and decided before humans formed the verbs. Snow exploded where paws launched, a low sound rolling from the ribcage like earth moving. One man leaned back into bark, suddenly aware of edges. The other chose flight, learned ice. Jonah's presence turned the air rigid, authority folding around the moment like a second temperature. People gathered their children and tried not to look. The men dissolved into pathways. The lesson remained.
Heater coils glowed tired orange in the cruiser, breathing thaw into cloth and bone. The bear sat between boy and reality, a soft barricade dimpled by years of squeezing. Jonah traced the ear seam again, not to pry, but to confirm what instinct had already cataloged. Threads told a story of hands that mended with purpose. The blade lifted a stitch and then another, small violences in the service of mercy. Metal winked up from cotton like a fish breaking brown water. A key slid into a gloved palm and made a weightless clink that changed gravity anyway. Aiden watched without flinching, learning that loss could also reveal. Rex K9 placed his chin on the boy's knee, a counterweight to panic. Snow sketched arcs on the windshield, then surrendered to melt. Evidence moved from toy to pouch. The room grew smaller and safer at the same time. Night had come scrubbed and sharp, hospital air made of anesthetic and economics. Graham Turner measured sips and side effects, counting minutes between clarity and curtain. The house carried footsteps that did not belong to comfort. Laughter thinned in the kitchen, and glass domesticated poison by wearing celebration. Upstairs, a child practiced the art of stillness, hearing words through wood that thickened and thinned with fear. Confrontation rose and broke against ceramic, anger arriving late to a fight with chemistry. Silence drove a nail into drywall. The boy's ceiling learned a new weight. Down the hall, the bear lay against a chair back, stitches tight around secrets. In the morning, the sky presented blue that meant nothing. Death write-ups prefer euphemisms, and signatures complied because that is what signatures sometimes do. But pages had already started to resist. Ink had already begun to gather its witnesses.
Oak benches pressed long grooves into the day, and light combed the courtroom into parts that mattered and parts that watched. Aiden walked the aisle like a small tide, steady because there was no other direction to go. Rex Canine's leash crossed his palm, a braided line that conducted courage. Testimony arrived as careful recollection, memory filtered through fear and simplified by honesty. The room leaned forward. Defense mechanisms wore suits and asked rhythm-breaking questions that did not change content. Small hands adjusted the bear beneath the coat as if aligning a compass. Judge Carr kept the space exact, mercy and rigor and measured alternation. The prosecutor arranged facts with the patience of someone stacking stones to walk across a river. When it ended without spectacle, which made it more permanent. The bark came later, a single clean note that sounded like punctuation after a long sentence. Arrogance wore a familiar face and a tailored coat that draped power over cruelty like good lighting. The yellow house had heard Conrad Rusk's chuckle before the snow did, a sound that placed small lives at the bottom of lists. He had held the door without holding the boy inside it. He had spoken to the air as if the air shared his contempt. His eyes had lingered on objects rather than people, cataloging value poorly. The porch learned the shape of his footsteps and then resented the knowledge. The day recorded his confidence and filed it under evidence. He thought roads were fixed and outcomes too. He thought nothing watched. But watchfulness stood on 4 feet in the yard and memorized his smell. Some days only keep their receipts for later. This one stored everything in the seam of a toy and the mind of a dog that disliked the way he moved.
Industrial streets drew straight lines that betrayed tires, and warehouses stacked silence into tidy rectangles. Jonah threaded the sedan through alleys that punished mass and rewarded resolve. The SUV shrugged off corners, then corrected, then bit down harder on pursuit. Air cut thin across metal. Aiden pressed his face into Rex Canine's shoulder and inhaled the unambiguous scent of dog and winter and dust. The shepherd watched reflections, tracking light like prey, waiting for the rhythm that invites interception. Engine notes argued. Flat walls offered no cover until a rail bridge did. Decision arrived cold and fast, and the sedan became force multiplied by planning. Snow threw itself from fenders, visibility contracted, choice narrowed to a blade's width. Timing turned from hazard to tool. The city offered a gap, and the car took it. Evidence thumped in the trunk, as if reminding everyone why this mattered. Dana Mercer's voice steadied in increments as confession moved weight from spine to table. She described dosage disguised as kindness, the wine glass that promised sleep and offered more. She cataloged symptoms against timelines until patterns cohered like frost flowers on pane glass. Bribery arrived folded in envelopes, then shame folded the envelopes into a drawer she opened nightly. She had written anyway, with a date and an hour and a pulse. The motel's thin heater ticked like a weak heart, and the lamp made a wobbling halo around paper that deserved cathedral light. Outside, a car idled and then thought better. Inside, the recorder drank her statement and metabolized it into a future argument. Rex Canine stayed between the door and the smallest person in the room, tail still, ears triangulating in tension. Truth grew heavier and therefore safer. Fear did not leave, it simply stood somewhere else.
Time warped in courthouse corridors, minutes swelling and thinning like breath in cold air. The jury's door became a horizon line no one could cross. People who had never met practiced identical pacing on opposite ends of the hall. Coffee cooled into a bitter monument to waiting. Papers lay still because moving them would imply control no one had. Aiden sat with his bear stitched neat and quiet, seam healed over its history like a scar that does not pretend. Rex Canine slept with one ear open, closing only what could be spared. Lila Hart existed as a steady presence that declined to become a promise. Jonah stood, sat, stood, walked, returned, held, released. Snow climbed the courthouse steps and was shoveled and climbed again. Decisions assembled themselves in rooms with no windows. Outside, a city finished its errands. Inside, consequences clothed themselves and prepared to enter. Names matter in storms because they turn weather into witness. The shepherd wore stray for a while, an absence where a title should be, then accepted one syllable that anchored him to a boy who needed anchors. The transformation took no ceremony. It arrived during a quiet minute when breath had evened out and threats had gone elsewhere to plan. Aiden shaped a name with lips chapped by January, and the dog recognized ownership that felt like partnership. From then, language obeyed the bond. Rex Canine walked rooms as if mapping them for future emergencies, checking exits, testing stairs, identifying which chair creaked and which door stuck. He slept with his back to the boy's shins, spine curved like a question mark, punctuating safety. The world did not become gentle, it became negotiated. Protection rearranged itself around a pair that moved as one body with 4 extra legs.
Speakers exhaled static and then memory, turning air into a courtroom instrument. Graham Turner arrived as voice, thinner than life but more enduring, threaded through electronics into oak and cloth. He named routines that changed, sensations that sharpened in ways they should not. The bitter trace in a glass presented as comfort. He described a sequence of events without drama because facts dislike embellishment. He said a name, and the room lost 5 degrees of temperature. A chair scraped a floor long ago and scraped it again here. The recording ended with the geometry of a fall. No one breathed until breath returned without permission. Documentation followed audio like a second blade. Medical charts annotated where they should not be. Signatures stretched oddly from hands that practiced too little. The judge allowed the sound to linger in the wood. The jury learned silence as evidence. The defense learned gravity. The verdict entered like weather breaking, not sudden but decisive. Pressure changing the behavior of everything that breathed. The words themselves were not exotic. Their arrangement gave them weight. Guilty transformed into architecture and then into motion. Sound exploded and retracted. Applause withheld by decorum, but not by relief. Rex Canine's single bark stitched the moment to memory, a clean seam that would not split. Aiden's shoulders loosened by degrees until posture remembered childhood again. Jonah let breath go in a measure calibrated not to tremble. Marissa's face learned the cost of composition. Conrad's jaw accepted outcome like a set of irons. The court officer's hand rested on a shoulder that had expected to remain unencumbered. The prosecutor closed a folder without triumph. Snow pressed its face to the windows and fogged them with a simple, mammal happiness. Justice did not fix winter, it made it survivable.
Sentencing day carried less spectacle and more echo, as if the building itself had learned caution. Numbers replaced adjectives, years stacking into a wall no performance could climb. Chains sounded like punctuation at the end of complicated sentences. Marissa Vane's elegance looked like costume against cinderblock. Conrad Rusk's strength looked like ballast now that movement belonged to someone else. Paperwork performed its rituals, signatures unrolled like road, and legality strapped consequence to bodies that had assumed exemption.
The gallery emptied in slow rivulets of relief and exhaustion. Reporters folded their hunger into bags and sought newer storms. On the steps, winter recommenced its work with indifference. Inside, the air held the shape of what had happened for a few more minutes before settling. Some justice feels theatrical. This justice felt administrative, which made it more terrifying for those who received it and more healing for those who survived. Outside the courthouse, snow fell without malice, returning to its origins as weather rather than weapon. Aiden stood inside a wool coat that remembered other bodies and learned this one quickly. The bear hid beneath fabric, no longer a container for keys, but a companion promoted back to its first job. Rex K9 scanned the plaza with a professional eye, and then allowed himself a small shake that sent crystals flying like confetti only he understood. Cameras lingered at a distance, their gazes hungry and then respectful, and then gone. Jonah's body finally believed the fight had moved categories. The air felt wider. Traffic resumed its indifferent conversations with lights. The building behind them turned from crucible to background. The boy's breath made clouds that drifted upward and disappeared into a sky that held nothing secret. The day loosened its fist and showed an open hand.
Family Court stripped the narrative down to essentials and arranged them around the child rather than the crime. Paper gathered consents from systems that had to agree in writing before hearts were allowed to do what they already knew. A judge read history aloud without flair, confirming connections formed under duress and refined by repetition. Jonah answered questions and sentences that had carried through other rooms, now softened by the absence of adversaries. Leela Hart contributed steadiness formatted as testimony, the kind that rarely appears in headlines but holds futures together. Rex K9 lay in a corner like furniture that could leap without creaking. Aiden colored on a clipboard, lines wandering into shapes that looked like houses with large windows. The ruling arrived like a key turning smoothly, and custody changed from temporary to permanent within the same breath. The boy's shoulders recorded the decision before his ears did. The house near the tree line wore modesty like strength. 2 windows watched the street. 1 watched the pines. The fireplace learned new names for wood, crackled through awkward beginnings into warmth that behaved itself. Aiden chose the room with a view into green, even while everything else was winter. He pinned a photograph above his bed, a man smiling in that unguarded way cameras rarely capture. Rex K9 inspected thresholds and declared them acceptable, then set about memorizing the home's night sounds. Jonah unpacked slowly, arranging the practical and the sentimental on the same shelves, letting them practice being neighbors. Outside, the yard wrapped around a rectangle of sky. Inside, routines took their first steps, tripping, standing, trying again. The refrigerator acquired magnets and intentions. The table learned breakfast. The front door learned pauses that were not fear, only adjustment. The house offered itself. The family accepted. Morning burned the first pancake, and the second because new kitchens require translation. Smoke chirped a small alarm and then stopped when Windows negotiated with February. Aiden laughed from a place lower in the chest, the sound brighter, edges rounded by sleep rather than stress. Flour dusted a counter like misplaced snow. Syrup drew a map over mistakes and declared them delicious. Rex K9 patrolled the border between chair and floor, respectful of plates, accepting crumbs as currency. Jonah relearned measurements that no cookbook specifies: when to flip, when to call it good enough, when to try again for the fun of it. Coffee found its balance between bitter and necessary. Light shifted across the table and turned utensils into small monuments. The day shed its courtroom skin and revealed hours that asked nothing but presence. Survival began to look like living,
and living practiced without apology. Routine carved grooves that invited calm to stay. Mail arrived and Rex Canine evaluated carriers as if employment depended on posture. The dog's skepticism chewed up worry and returned wag in controlled doses. Walks traced loops that mapped the neighborhood into a net. Aiden told secrets to fur and received silence that felt like understanding. He slept deeper, feet pressed into a shepherd's ribs, dreams guarded by weight. Jonah learned the precise creak in the floorboard outside the boy's door and avoided it without thinking. Leela visited with books that smelled like libraries and patience. The television stopped using sirens as background. The backyard learned the sound of laughter burying itself in cold air and surviving. Somewhere else, paperwork closed files and opened new ones with new names. Here, the dishwasher hummed and asked nothing. The world remained dangerous. The home remained ready.
Firelight found walls and painted them forgiving, a warm geometry that made elbows behave kindly. Aiden sat small and centered, bare softened to velvet under fingers that no longer clutched so hard. The question arrived without drama, shaped by trust rather than fear. The room received it and let it exist without hurrying. Jonah watched flames braid themselves and considered the mathematics of what people know without proof. He believed in evidence as a profession and believed in love as a working theory. The answer formed in the space where both lived. It did not require words to begin soothing. Rex Canine shifted and sighed with the weight of a creature who has done his job and plans to continue. Snoo pressed the windows gently, curious but not insistent. The night stayed small and good. History took up less space without surrendering its lessons. The story folded itself along creases made by danger and unfolded into a shape that balanced. It had asked for bravery from a boy and precision from a detective, and steadfastness from a dog whose name became Oath. It had used winter as texture and not as verdict. It had learned that justice feels less like trumpets and more like paperwork completed correctly and sleep taken without alarms. The yellow house became an address, not an origin. The bank vault became a scene, not a labyrinth. The motel curtain stopped moving. The underpass echoed with other cars going other places. In a small home near trees, breath made its quiet loops. Pancakes became a tradition instead of a test. Rex Canine patrolled and dreamed and woke when footsteps deviated from pattern. Lives moved forward on legs that had trembled and now carried weight without breaking. The light held.